Was waiting. I put mine on.
Finally, the knitted
cousin. Well, it's very early morning in New York, but this was the best time for my guest. So of course, because I wanted Julie to come on and introduce herself to Show and Tell today, I agreed to wake up pretty early this afternoon where she is in Denmark. So this is Show and Tell. I'm Billie, and my guest today is Julie. I'm not sure if you pronounce your last name Folving.
Yeah, it's close to how we pronounce it here in Denmark.
Okay, so you say it.
Yes, Julie Folving.
Folving.
Yeah.
Okay, and she is coming to us from Denmark. So as is my habit, I'm going to ask her to tell us something about her town that if we came there as a tourist, we wouldn't find in our guidebook. So we'll kick it off with that, and then we're going to talk all things vintage knitting. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I live very close to our capital, Copenhagen. And in Copenhagen, there's lots to see, and there's a lot of history also. One of the big thing and the main tourist attraction is, of course, Tivoli, which is a very old amusement park back from 1843. And it has a very old roller coaster, perhaps the oldest. It was built in 1914, and it's still running. So that's something to see. Besides from that, we also have our annual treat rides, where we ride bikes wearing treats in Fair Isle knitting around in the streets of Copenhagen. And it's just next weekend. And it's also an attraction to come and see us ride our bikes. There's many of us, there's jazz music playing, traffic stops. So it's very festive, yeah.
And very vintage, how cool.
Very vintage, wearing hats and fur coats or whatever the weather is like. It can be, it can change a lot here during September. It could be a warm sunny day or it could be rainy and cold. So.
And do people have vintage bikes also?
Some do, yes. And vintage uniforms. Some for being a post officer, riding bikes back in the old days, some soldiers, and there's a lot of people joining in.
Oh, that's really
with vintage interests.
Well, I wish I could be there. It sounds like fun. I don't ride a bike.
And then we have a picnic. In the middle of the ride, we stop at one of the parks in Copenhagen, and we bring all our picnic baskets and teacups and tablecloths, and everything is laid out, and then we have a wonderful picnic. And get to chat with one another and perhaps ask for knitting patterns or admire each other's hats. And it's very fun to be a part of.
Well, thanks for sharing that. Before we go any further, I must compliment you on the sweater that you're wearing.
Yes, do you recognize?
I am knitting. I am in the midst of knitting that sweater right now.
Yes, I saw from one of your shows that you did a knit along, I think, where there was a picture and she was wearing it in green. I also did it in another color. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a really great opportunity for me to plug the knit along. If you want to join this knit along, it's not too late. There'll be information in the show notes. But let's get back to you and your knitting. So it's great. I just love what you're wearing. But I know that you brought other things to show us, and it seems like you have a lot. So
I've been knitting vintage garments for about 10 years now. So I have a lot, and basically, I didn't find it that difficult to read the English patterns, and then I just began to learn also by using YouTube videos, and I advanced from that on.
Okay, so show us what you brought.
Yes, this one is the same pattern, but just kind of more like a sailor look. And then a couple of the things that I knitted it again, and then I brought the knowledge that I had if I wanted to make this a little bit longer, or yeah. So sometimes it's nice when you get to know the pattern, and then you can adjust it, make it a little more fitted to your size, for instance. So a little bit of test knitting sometimes. I
love it. I love it when it's two-tone.
Yeah, so that's one. I have a lot of these kind of jumpers with the short sleeves. Here's another one that's kind of more of a 30 model with the big collar and the puff sleeves.
Having that light trim on the edge really makes the collar very prominent.
Yeah,
It would just blend in without that. So that's a
I'm not that good with crocheting, but I still want to learn to do more of make the edges more like a better finish, but I'm still learning.
I'm not such a great crocheter either. It takes practice like anything else.
It does. And then I have this one. I knitted quite a few from Susan Crawford's A Stitch in Time. I love her books, and it makes it, of course, easier when she has been working with the old patterns, and you still get to see the old patterns also in the book.
What type of yarn did you use? Is it wool or it's something else?
It's merino wool. So it's baby merino. It's very light, and it's a needle size, European size 3. And that's basically most of the knitting I do. It's needle size 3. I knit quite loose, so I always have to think about not making it too large. And I also have to make it longer because some of the patterns are very short here in the torso. So that's also what I learned along the way. Yeah, but I just love the models that have the different kind of structure, and then you go from the pattern onto something else, and perhaps you add a little button or a color. It's just yeah.
It's very pretty. I hadn't seen that one before.
And then this one I did recently with the pattern leaves. I just love that type of knitting also. There's a lot of different type of patterns where it will use the pattern leaves. So.
And that's also wool?
It's also wool, yes. I only did actually a few things in cotton. This one is a cotton, and it says a completed outfit with a skirt.
Oh.
And then there's a blouse to go with that.
Wow. How long did that take you, that whole outfit? It seems like a lot of knitting.
It was, but it was also a little bit like meditation when I just got started, and it was very easy because it's just repeating the pattern and not too much shaping of the garment. So I really didn't have to stop and read the pattern much. I could just go on and on.
But the
And then I would,
skirt, it's endless.
it is, it's below the knee. And then I wanted to complete it. I do like matching outfits, so I wanted to complete it with a hat.
I was
So
going to ask you how you style that, if you have special jewelry that you wear or something. The hat, how interesting.
I did a hat that I found from another vintage pattern, and I did a little belt as well, using a vintage buckle. Let's see if I lost that somewhere here. Oh, it's here. So I did a vintage buckle, and then, yeah, just a straight belt.
So then you can wear black shoe. Otherwise, you need to have a yellow shoe. Good
Yeah,
luck.
and then I just wanted to have more kind of a waisted look, and so the belt makes that possible. Yeah, I have a lot more, so you have to tell me when to
Oh, it's wonderful. Keep going as long as you want.
stop. And this one I did a couple of times also. It's a cardigan. It's called the Wallace Simpson cardigan. Have you heard of that pattern before?
No, but I've heard of her. She was an
Yes.
American.
She married the Prince of
Well,
England.
that story we know.
Yes.
To abdicate
And
because
she
she was
was,
divorced.
but she was also admired for her style
Oh,
and her wedding dress. She was wearing a wedding dress that had a lot of pleats going down here. So this cardigan was inspired by her wedding dress, her fashion, or her sense of style.
I
So,
love that. I think
and then
it's very
I found
attractive.
some vintage buttons from the 30s, and I thought they were a good match. They are also bought in England.
Can you show the buttons up close to your camera?
Yeah,
Just one would be good.
yeah. I also have one in green. I think I have them here on this one.
Oh, nice. Thank you.
Yeah, they were, and here they are in green.
When you find one you like,
Yeah, you have to
grab
get
it.
them one. And now it's so much more difficult for me to buy from England because of Brexit. Yes. So these I bought a lot. Fortunately, I got a lot to my stash of vintage buttons before Brexit.
We have many in the United States also. So if you come to New
Yeah.
York,
Yeah,
you can find them.
I will definitely look for them.
But there are people online selling vintage buttons. I know some of them are British, but there must be other countries in Europe that have vintage
Yeah,
buttons.
I think so, but just American England are some of the countries that has a longer tradition, I think, for liking vintage and perhaps keeping what they had for a long time, and
manufacturing, maybe.
yeah, exactly. So it could be a little more difficult to find good things in other countries, but you just have to be on your toes and keep a watch out.
Well, next time I come to Europe, I'll be sure and bring all kinds of vintage buttons with me.
Yeah. So I did this one with
Yeah.
the bows and the shoulder pads, the knitted shoulder pads.
Did you knit the shoulder pads or you put in a shoulder pad?
I did knit. The pattern had a description on how to knit a shoulder pad. So I did that. So it actually took a long time knitting this because all the time you have to make a new stitch, and then that's why it folds like this to make the structure. And then when you're finished with the color and you go back to the black one, then you knit 2 stitches together. So yeah, so you increases your stitches on the needle every time that you make the ribbons. Yeah, so that took a long time.
That's really cute. It's very cute. And the colors, the color choices. And I've seen other people do it, but it really depends on what colors you use, how cute it is.
Yeah. And I did one with cable knit,
Oh.
and it reminds me that I really have to do more cables because I like it, but yes, it's not something I get to do that often, but it's definitely on my to-do list to do another white one with cables. I think kind of like a tennis pullover or something like that. Yeah, with a V-neck. And then recently I did the Land Girl pullover from the original pattern for the Land Girls of the Land Army in Britain during World War II. There was a whole uniform that they would put on, and then you could knit your own pullover and matching socks.
And was it always done in that color, do you think?
Yes, it was always done in this dark green color. Yeah. So so it was a type of uniform because it was during wartime. So they wanted all the girls to unite in a way. Yeah, making sure that they secured the food supply from the farms, not having the men around. They went to war. Yes.
It's a great basic V-neck.
It is. And I also like knitting that has a history that interests me a lot. Yeah. And especially patterns from wartime where you use up scratch or what you have in the depth of your yarn. For instance, the rainbow jumper, the lavender rainbow jumper I did a couple of times, just using leftover yarn.
So you have very good color sense. I think for many people, choosing 3 or 4 colors is very difficult, but you've done a splendid job of putting them together.
It's also what interests me, and it's also some of the creative part of the knitting. I really enjoy putting colors together, seeing what works, and sometimes you decide on something, and then when you put the yarn together, you can just see that it won't work. So so that's really a part of it. I enjoy planning out what the jumper or the sweater should look like.
And if you want to stay historical, you can find in museums sometimes sweaters and see what colors they actually used in the period.
Yeah, I was very impressed by your knitting when I watched the interview with Susan Crawford, and I saw all your knitting, and especially the historic ones with the very tiny needles and a lot of different colors used, and yeah, very.
I usually change it up. I don't often go with the historical colors because I want it to be mine. You know, I want to have like my stamp on it.
Of course.
And I'm so pale and bland. Sometimes I need a little spark of color to jazz it up. So my fair out that I did from Susan Crawford's book is nothing at all like the colors that were originally used in the sweater. I did see the original sweater in Shetland.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful. It was so much work to do that sweater. I don't think I would ever replicate it in different colors. For other people who might want to knit that genie that I knit, I would probably stay with the colors that Susan Crawford used.
Yeah, perhaps that's easier, but I also like to put my own stamp on things and create something. And I'm always curious to see how the work goes along while you're knitting it, to see how the colors comes out. And yeah, sometimes I succeed and sometimes I don't. And that's just, I guess that's just a chance for your creativity.
Well, I also admire that you've tried everything. You've done lace, you've done cables, you've done slip stitches, you've done color work.
Yeah. And then I did, to go with the land girl uniform, I did a knitted tie.
Oh, cute.
Yeah. So that's just a little detail that's, yeah, and fun to do. And what else have I done? I also done a little of the fair knitting.
Lovely.
This one. And I enjoy reading about the old patterns and where they came from and what the traditions were. And yeah, so I have quite a lot of knitting books just explaining that at one place they had a tradition doing this or doing that. And yeah, it's interesting.
I agree.
Then I did quite a few sweaters. I also am fascinated by the kind of ice skating knits. So a sweater for putting on your ice skates. And then I did a knitted hat to go with it. And I'm actually still in progress on knitting mittens to go with it. Yeah.
Do you knit for your children also?
I do knit a lot for my children.
Vintage or not?
Mostly not, I will say, because it's so much easier to find children's patterns, and just sometimes knitwear lives a little what do you say, a little harder life, being on a playground and running around, and so being at school. So I don't want to knit something that they are not allowed to wear, so they wear everything. And yeah,
And beat it up.
yeah, actually. But we have a tradition in my family, which is Christmas knitwear. So we go and have our picture taken at Christmas time for a Christmas card. And then all of us wear knitwear that I knitted. So, and usually I wear vintage knitwear.
And it's different every year? Each year you're creating a new sweater?
Mostly for myself, not for everyone.
Okay.
Mostly for myself. And then if I have the time, I have to, also because the kids are growing, I have to renew. And then one of the other sweaters are passed on to the younger one. So yeah. So I knitted this one with reindeers on and shoulder pads. And then I did, like the yellow hat, I did a red one to wear. And then I put a little holly leaves in, and yeah. And then
Just as you said holly leaves, I was thinking Hollywood.
okay.
I'm pretty sure that there was some actress, Roz Russell maybe, I don't know, somebody wore a hat like that in a movie, but I think with like a scarf coming down.
Yeah, I see that also when you, yeah. It was very fashionable, I think, with a white scarf coming down. Yeah. But it's also just nice to have a Christmas card to send to your family, and then I'm proud of being a knitter, and they get to see new sweaters with, of course, for the children, is Christmas trees and snowmans and things like that.
So who taught you to knit?
Well, I do come from a generation of knitters. I did found some old pictures because I wanted to see if I had any of my grandmother knitting. I couldn't find. I have a few photo albums from when she was younger, when her children were small, in black and white. But I did find a picture of her knitting on one of our summer vacation. And here she's actually, this is 1980, and she's knitting for me. And I think this is what she knitted, what I'm wearing.
Oh, how wonderful to have these.
So it's fun to, and then I realized, looking through these old pictures from my childhood, that I did wear a lot of knitwear. And it's just actually in every photo I could see either a knitted sweater, stockings. So I think that actually my grandmother, she knitted for us children and grandchildren, and perhaps not so much for herself anymore at that age, but she was a good knitter, and she taught her children. My mother knitted, and it was just something that were very common that you did. If you needed a pair of stockings, you would knit them yourself. And
Is she the person who taught you to knit, or was it your mother
yeah,
or someone else?
my grandmother did teach me when I was a teenager. But then for a long time, I think I knitted something when I was visiting her, and I just had the knitwear to lay in a basket at her house. And when I visited her, we would knit a little bit each time, and then I just learned to knit right and purl and not much else. And then when I actually was pregnant with my first child, I wanted to do some baby clothes and some very easy knitting, and that's about 12 years ago. And then I took a knitting course, and then I learned everything from the beginning. To make stitches and I didn't remember much from my childhood at that time, but now I knit every day.
Because I find from some of the northern countries in Europe that people tell me they learned to knit in school.
Yes.
But boys and girls were both knitting in school. And if you learn very early on, it can stay with you for your whole life.
Yes. We did have knitting in school. We did have to knit a scarf and just basic things. Yes. So it wasn't that far away. I just never knitted really advanced knitting. And it took me some time to read patterns and understand them, and also understand how to create something for the body, the shoulders and your waist. That was a little more difficult because I wanted to go for the fitted look more than the loose sweater look. So
don't you find that the more you knit, the more experience you get, the better you get?
Yeah, exactly. I do. But yeah, I have a lot on my list. So there's still so many things that I want to have the time to knit. My hands don't knit as fast as my head. My head is always in progress and thinking, I want to do.
Who else feels like that?
Yeah. So always on my next project. And I remember one of your interviews, you talked about who knitted on different projects at the same time. And I'm one of those people. I knit on perhaps 5 different things. And you talked about that it takes some time picking it up when you have left it and you went on to something else, it takes some time. And perhaps I also get inspired by the season. So if it's cold and winter and snow, I want to knit something warm and winterly, but then I don't finish perhaps until later on, and then I put it away. Or I'm still in process of knitting a bathing suit, a vintage bathing suit. And
well, you missed this summer.
yes, and I don't get to finish it this summer. So yeah, but I wanted to. So every time the season is changing, I get inspired to do something, and you actually have to be a little earlier to plan.
That raises an interesting question. How do you decide? Well, first of all, you said there's always like 5. How do you prevent yourself from starting a 6th, the 7th, and 8th? How do you limit it to those 5? What mental gymnastics do you do to curtail it?
I guess I just get a little bit stubborn. I really want to finish it, and my curiosity about how will this fit me or fit my child or whatever I'm doing. I really want to put it on and see, did my measurements, did my my planning of how long the sleeve should be, or do it add up all together? So my curiosity in the end drives me to finish it and see. And sometimes I'm very pleased, and once in a while I'm not. So yeah, that's the
Well, same for me. In fact, this morning I was just thinking there was a sweater I went to put on over the weekend, and I didn't like how it looked, and I took it off and I didn't wear it. We were going out for lunch. And I thought I probably should rip out the front of the sweater and redo it. But it's got some mohair woven in. I have several things like that in my closet that are finished, but they're not finished well.
yeah.
Always this juggling act of, buy new yarn. It's very exciting. Finish something. Behind me, this is not done.
Yeah.
It's almost done, but because of the knit along, I got started on a summer sweater. I thought this was going to take me a much longer time than it is.
It's very easy with the waves pattern.
Yes, those rows,
really quick.
Fly right across. Those are delightful. But it's also on a bigger needle than what you and I are used to knitting.
Yeah.
US 5, I don't know how many millimeters that is, but you mentioned 3. I'm assuming that's 3 millimeters. And I think that's close to our US 3, which is quite a bit smaller than a 5. So having this bigger needle is helping it go much faster. But I'm sure a lot of people struggle with this, which is why I wanted you to talk about it a little bit. For you, it's the curiosity. For me, it's more about discipline, like whipping myself, sort of like, don't buy new yarn, don't start a new project until you at least finish. Like, I will not start anything until this is finished. And it's a mind game.
It is.
Kind of train your mind to have some discipline. I always equate it to eating. Like, I want to eat a lot, and I want to eat things I shouldn't eat. And you have to, get into your head, well, you can have it, but you just can't have a whole package of it.
Exactly. Yeah. I think the worst thing to knit is the second mitten or the second sock, something that you have already done, and you need to do almost an exact copy of that. I think that's the most or the less motivating and the most difficult thing to repeat yourself. Yes.
Tip, knit them 2 at a time.
No, but I did also knit mittens. So these are a little more Christmas type of mittens. They were actually knitted in, it gets really dark here during winter time because it's so north in Scandinavia. So I couldn't see that I got to use or by mistake a white type of yarn and then like a more off-white. So I didn't notice that just from knitting under my knitting lamp. I couldn't tell. So when I got out in daylight, I saw it. So it's a little, yeah, it's a mistake. And then I did this matching hood with little pom-poms on. So it's,
Very
yeah,
cute.
very winter wonderland type of knitwear.
So we know the Scandinavian countries have a long tradition of knitting because it's cold there. I know that Norway has a lot of these star motifs, or the Selbu rose, I guess they call it. Does Denmark also have its own styles or patterns that it's famous for?
Not in the same way as Norway or Sweden. They had more, I think, they had sheeps and more wool production than Denmark ever did. Denmark farming were more cows and yeah, so not the exact same tradition for knitting patterns, unfortunately.
But
But
there
I
are
think,
Danish nightshirts, I think.
sorry?
I think there are Danish nightshirts, like undergarments that you would sleep in.
Yeah.
Traditional.
I know that the Danes would make their own knitwear, but I think they wasn't that creative, and they don't have like a pattern like stars or anything. They would color their yarn, of course, by themselves using what they had, flowers and beads and things like that from the household. But we are a lot of inspired by the Nordic knitting here, and use patterns from Norway and Sweden. Yeah.
That's what that's exactly what I'm doing now.
Yeah,
good.
that I really like. And then there's of course the Faroe Islands. It's a part of Denmark, and they have a lot of sheeps up there. So it's also a dream to sail to the Faroe Islands and talk with people there about their traditions, about knitting and bringing up, yeah, sheeps for wool and coloring it afterwards.
Okay, so I know you also mentioned you have some books. Did you pull out
Yeah.
anything you want to show us? The photographs were wonderful. I love old family photos.
I have bought recently some knitting books from the 30s and in Danish, and it's kind of special to have something in your own language being vintage, because it's rare and there's so little left of it, and it also tells me something about Danish history. And it's also something that really interests me. So just reading it, you can kind of pick up on how society was, and it has a lot of patterns for women, for children, and yeah.
Would you say that the way in which the patterns are written down is very different from patterns that are written in English?
I think the patterns that are written down here are more similar to the English vintage ones, just in Danish. But the modern patterns, it can be a little more difficult, even though it's your own language, it could be a little more difficult to understand if you don't know the technique in advance. I think that the English ones has a more, it takes you by the hand a little bit more, and so does the old Danish ones. So the descriptions and how to follow it, it's more helpful and kind of more, it's easier than how the written patterns can be. I don't do that much modern in knitwear, so because my time is occupied by the vintage things.
So for example, in the book that you're holding, would they say row 1, knit 5 of this color? Like they spell out every step, knit 5 of this, knit 3 of that, purl 2. Each step is written out in words?
No, not that much. But it does help you prevent doing some of the mistakes by telling you, you begin, then you continue this and this, then on your second row you have this many stitches, and then I think it's I'm looking forward to spending some more time looking into these patterns, and I haven't gotten to knit anything from this one, but so far by just reading it, it seems easy enough.
I love when they tell you stitch counts. A lot of patterns don't do that.
Yeah.
And are there charts or not yet?
No, let me see if anyone. I do prefer charts,
But I
because
think a lot of these patterns from the 30s and 40s, they weren't using charts yet.
no, I don't
I
think
didn't know in Denmark if they were.
I don't think they're using charts in these ones either. Let's see. This one I have from my grandmother, and I just found it, not knowing that she had it. I found it in some of her belongings after she passed away, and yeah, so it's nice to have something from your grandparents. But no, I don't think there's any charts in here either. But it's still kind of how the garment should look like. I like that.
Schematic.
Yeah.
That's so great. Yeah.
When they're laid out flat, how they should look.
The
It
sweater
gives you-
you're wearing has a schematic.
Yeah, so it
Very
teaches
helpful.
you, it teaches you how the garment should, where it should be on the widest, where it should be narrow, how low you should do the neckline, and I think that's very helpful.
And a lot of vintage patterns don't give that. So when you find one that does, it's like, hallelujah.
Exactly. Yeah. So yes. So I have these, and then of course I have a stitch in time, and I have the Vintage Shetland project by Susan Crawford. Love that.
That's the book. That's
Yeah.
the book that has the pattern that I knit. The jean.
Yeah. I haven't knitted anything yet because it looks like it's something that will take me some time, and perhaps I have to really focus on that one and not having so much of other things I want to finish as well. So what else do I have? Then I sometimes find something on eBay or Etsy where it's not the original old patterns, but it's
A reprint.
It's a reprint, and it's still really lovely.
Adorable.
And
I
this
love
hat.
the typefaces that they use and how they have the writing on an angle. It's so
Yeah.
indicative of the time period. Oh, that hat, like
But,
fascinator.
yeah, so it's hats and
Wow.
bags
The
and gloves.
handbag. Ooh.
Oh, yeah, it's very very beautiful. Very beautiful. So it's just I did a couple of hats like you saw, but I think it's still difficult to knit one with brims and yeah, to make the right shape of a hat. But I still want to take the challenge sometime.
Did you make the one that you're wearing?
No, I didn't. No.
Because it's very attractive.
It goes well with green, so green was my
Yeah.
color today.
That's always my default. If I can't find a hat that I like, I'll just knit a beret.
Yeah,
It goes with practically everything.
exactly. I do that with turbans. So I had for the Wallace Simpson cardigan, I knitted a turban to go with it, and makes a cute look when you have a matching turban on. Yes, what else did I do? Talking about the season, here's a fall or autumn inspired sweater.
Oh,
And I did the leaves. I did my own chart for the leaves. So I found some leaves, and then I painted them into a chart, and then I used the acorns here. So it's a little.
did you make the acorns?
Yes,
Are they knit or crochet?
they are knitted.
Oh, they're great.
So it's a little detail that, yeah, makes it a nice autumn themed.
Also, the little checkerboard along the bottom edge is very, nice little touch, extra touch.
Yeah,
Oh, and on the sleeve also.
yeah, it has a little puff sleeves.
No, but the cuff.
Yes, they were here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's nice to have that little pattern there.
and then I guess you have seen the knitted fox that I did.
Well, I was waiting. That's why I put mine on.
Finally, the knitted
Hi,
fox.
cousin.
Yes, I like that one. I really wanted to make it as true to a real fur fox that I also own a couple of, and using buttons as eyes and yeah, the nose. So
When you
that was
wear it, what do people say?
I wore it at the treat ride, and it really was a well accessory to wear on that treat ride, because it goes well with the autumn colors and the tweeds, and yeah, among vintage enthusiasts. So it was meant to be more kind of a scarf, so you should tie it, but then I filled it, I stuffed it. So because I wanted it to be more like a stole. So, but I should wear it again soon, now where it will be cooler days. And it should just sit here on my shoulder, going out for lunch or something. Yes.
Your kids must love that.
They do. They're used to that. I have always a lot of knitwear hanging and lying around, and baskets.
No, but this is like a little stuffed animal. Like
exactly.
A wearable toy.
It is. Yes.
Well, thanks for showing that. That was like highlight for me and for my own little fox.
Yeah, it was a fun idea, definitely. what else do I have? I have a more kind of a military jacket that I knitted, a cheap jacket, going back to wartime knitting.
I love it.
It has a lot of details with the pockets and the cufflinks here, and kind of goes in here with a little belt here underneath.
Oh, so it doesn't zip up or button, it's just at the waist that it buttons.
Yeah, exactly.
Looks cozy.
It's very cozy. And yeah, and I like the pictures where women got to wear uniforms and were inspired by yeah, the war uniforms.
Military.
Look.
Yeah.
Yes, what else do I have?
That's plenty. You
I
still
have a lot.
show? I mean, it's fine if that's it. That's so much, and all of it was delicious.
Yeah, so and then I'm knitting on another jumper with kind of more of an Art Deco hole pattern coming down here.
Yes.
So that will be nice, I think. And I love using colors. I like yellow and green, and yeah, I'm very much into using, yeah, a lot of colors in my knitwear.
Different color palette from me. I'm like blues and purples, sometimes pink, but you're more fall colors, yellows and greens and browns.
Yeah, that's true.
Coloring. Well, for people who want to see more of Julie's work and also her vintage clothing and her whole aesthetic, I know she has an Instagram account, and I'll put it on the screen and in the show notes as well. Are there other places online where people can find you? Are you on Ravelry?
No, I'm not actually. I tried to use that a few times, but I never really gotten into knowing exactly yeah, how to find my way around. I think it's a little confusing. I don't know if
I
it's
did a
just me.
little video just for people like you.
Yeah,
And basic things. It's
knowledge.
like tutorial, because I knit with a group of other women on Friday afternoons, and one of them was very new to the whole thing, and she, like you, she tried to look into Ravelry and she was like befuddled. So she said, Billie, since you have the podcast, why don't you make a video? Because I showed her in person how to use Ravelry. So Elaine encouraged me to make a little video, which I did, and I think it could be very helpful for people who are confused by Ravelry. There's so much, there's so many layers and so
Yeah,
many different directions that I think it can be overwhelming, but there's so much there that's worthwhile. Not just the yarns, not just the patterns, but if you have a particular yarn, for example, and you want to see what other people have made with that yarn, you can. You have a particular weight, like let's say you have lace weight, 2 strands of something. You can see what other people have done, so it could give you ideas. Also, you know, if you're searching for a vintage pattern, you can put in little keywords like, you know, 1940s, and it'll bring up not every 1940s pattern, but the ones that are in its database. They have millions of patterns in their database.
Yeah.
If you're searching for people from Denmark, other knitters, people from your own town, you can search by location. There's so much, and my video really just scrapes the surface, but it's a good way of getting into some basic stuff, and then you start exploring. I use it practically every day, and I have all of my patterns there, everything I've knit in modern times, you know, not from my childhood. with the yarn that I use. So like, it's a good place to document, to have like a knitting diary. So this sweater, for example, which I knit in the 1980s, I put it into Ravelry's database. So I can go back and see what yarn I used and what the gauge was.
Mhm.
There's other yarns in here too. This was Angora. So I have it all notated there so I can refer back to it. And that way, if somebody asks me, well, what yarn did you use for this? It's there in
And you have it
Ravelry. I don't
there.
have to go find the ball bands or anything. So
Mhm.
it's useful for that too. And then making friends is yet another layer. So, I mean, I'm not like a salesperson for Ravelry, but I think it's a really
Yeah.
great tool for knitters. So,
Yeah, I really want to do that. And I did some attempt to figure it all out, but I just kind of I couldn't find my way around. But I'm definitely going to look at the video and get some instructions.
there's
And
also forums where you can ask questions. So if you got stuck in Ravelry and you were like, well, how do I do this? There are people who you can ask and they'll answer you.
Mm.
And there's also like special interest groups, like there's probably a group of Danish knitters. And
Yeah,
they may post like all the yarn events that are going on in your country or in your region. So there's a lot of
that's a
different
lot.
layers. I highly recommend, highly recommend. I can't
Mm.
imagine in this day and
Not
age,
having.
anyone anywhere in the world being a knitter and not being on it. It's the
Mm.
most fabulous, to me, the most fabulous tool of all.
Yeah.
Lot of information.
I'll give it another go
Yeah,
and
give it another
see.
look.
Yeah, I really want to get in touch with other knitters that have an interest for vintage knitting being in my country, because it's I think um, I've only met a couple on Instagram, so perhaps I'll meet more that have an interest for vintage knitting on Ravelry.
You can also start your own group.
Yeah. Ah,
You'll see
yes,
that
I
once
can
you
do
go.
that. See who
Yeah,
joins in.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good idea.
Or like if people were coming to New York for Vogue Knitting Live or for Rhinebeck, you might see other people coming from Europe, how they're traveling. Maybe you could travel with them, that kind of thing. I mean, you can look for people who are
Mm,
doing specific things of interest to you, or maybe people going to the Faroe Islands and there's an organized trip
yeah.
and you could join in. All things like that. It's really, really amazing.
Mm,
What else is there about yarn? Like, for this, I was looking in their database for the original yarn that's called for in the pattern. They didn't happen to have it listed, but often they do. Even a yarn that's discontinued, it's still in their database. So like for this, I didn't really know what type of yarn they were using. I just knew the name of it, but I don't know any of the properties. I assumed that it was cotton.
mm,
Um, Based on the name, it was called tri-cotton, so I figured it might have been a cotton yarn. But sometimes with a vintage pattern, the yarn was popular enough that somebody has entered it into the database and you can see what needle was used, what date
mm.
they got, and how drapey it was, or
Wow. Yeah, that
how many
sounds healthy.
yards were in a ball. Like I had to guess how much yarn to buy because I don't know what
Yeah.
their yarn was. So a
Mm.
lot of things like that can be really helpful.
Yeah.
Well, okay. I mean, it was really fun to meet you impromptu like this. And
Yes, likewise.
I hope you enjoy the rest of your day when your kids come home. I don't know how soon that is, but
I think I'll be home very soon. Yes.
okay. So I'm going
Yeah,
to let
I'm
you
very
go.
pleased that we had our chat today. It was really interesting, and I also enjoyed viewing your interviews with the vintage knitters of Europe and the States, and it's a lot of different countries. It's very interesting to see what they had on their mind and on their needles.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Julie.
Yeah, you're welcome.